You've felt it, the quiet exhaustion of being the one who understands too much. You absorb what others release, mistaking empathy for duty. Broken souls are drawn to your calm, sensing refuge in your light, yet forgetting that light too can fade. True compassion isn't carrying every wound, it's knowing which are not yours to hold. Kindness without boundaries becomes self-loss disguised as love. When you stop rescuing, you begin respecting both yourself and them. Awareness was never loneliness. It is the moment clarity returns home, realizing peace doesn't require saving anyone to prove its worth. When empathy becomes a silent cage. There's a woman I once knew, let's call her Sarah. She lives alone in Brooklyn, surrounded by quiet furniture and the faint glow of her phone always face up on the table. Not because she's addicted to it, but because she's waiting for someone to need her. A friend unraveling from heartbreak. A colleague drowning in anxiety. A sister who only calls when the world collapses again. Helping has never been her burden, it's her reflex. Somewhere along the way, she forgot what it felt like to sit in silence without guilt, to exist without proving her worth through usefulness. Science calls it empathy, the firing of mirror neurons that make us wince when another is hurt. But for some, these neurons never rest. They absorb pain like lungs take in air. You walk into a tense room and leave heavier though nothing happened to you. You listen to another's suffering, and their sorrow nests quietly in your body for days. This isn't weakness, it's sensitivity. A nervous system, finely tuned to emotion. But when that sensitivity becomes your identity, something sacred begins to erode. Many empaths learned early, I am safe when others are calm. I am loved when I am needed. You became the child who mediated, who noticed before the storm came. The listener, the peacekeeper, the one who made everyone else feel okay, even when you weren't. And it worked. People loved you for it. They still do. But affection built on dependency is a quiet kind of prison. When empathy becomes identity, it ceases to be a virtue. It becomes a cage disguised as purpose. You answer every message, offer comfort, even when your own spirit is empty, and mistake exhaustion for devotion. Underneath it all hums a truth you dare not name. You're tired of being kind. The Stoics warned of this. Marcus Aurelius wrote that one should do good without attachment to outcome, not without regard for self. To serve others while neglecting your own soul is not compassion. It's self-erasure, wearing the mask of morality. Modern life deepens the trap. Cities flood your senses, noise, crowds, strangers carrying invisible sorrow. You return home depleted, yet still feel responsible for holding everyone else together. The exhaustion of the empath is not loud. It's quiet. It hides behind functionality. You show up, you listen, you help all, while your inner world drifts further from peace. What began as love has turned into survival. You call it compassion, but it's guilt. You stay because leaving feels cruel. You help because silence feels wrong. But the truth is simple and freeing. You're no longer healing anyone. You're merely preventing discomfort while slowly vanishing into it yourself. 2. They don't want help. They want your energy. A friend of mine, a writer, once spent a year meeting the same person for coffee. Same cafe. Same story. Every time it began with a sigh, "I don't know what to do." She would listen with patience, offer thoughtful questions, help them see clearly. They would leave relieved, grateful, seemingly changed. And yet 2 weeks later, the same message, the same problem, the same loop. It took her months to understand what was really happening. They weren't seeking change. They were seeking her calm. What they wanted wasn't guidance, it was her energy. The steady presence of someone whose mind wasn't burning. Empaths rarely see this transaction for what it is. When someone's nervous system is in chaos, your composure becomes a source of temporary relief. Psychology calls it co-regulation. Their body borrows your balance. But when this pattern repeats, they never learn to steady themselves. They simply outsource their peace to you. You become a silent battery. They plug in, recharge, and walk away lighter, leaving you dimmed. You tell yourself it was just a conversation, but your fatigue says otherwise. Because it wasn't an exchange, it was extraction. Some people grow dependent on that comfort. Not addicted to you, but to the feeling of beauty you provide. It feels like closeness, but it's not. You'll notice it when you withdraw, when you take longer to reply, when you protect your time. Suddenly you're accused of being distant, of changing. What once felt mutual reveals its condition. I am valued only when I am available. This isn't manipulation. It's unconscious survival. They seek peace the way one seeks painkillers, not to heal, but to forget pain for a moment. Yet every time you absorb their storm, your body pays the price. Biologically, empathy is rewarding. Oxytocin gives you warmth, meaning connection. But constant exposure to others' distress releases cortisol stress that your system can't distinguish from your own. Eventually, you live in quiet fatigue, not from overwork, but from overfeeling. You withdraw not because you've stopped caring, but because your nervous system can no longer bear to be a vessel for everyone else's storms. Here's the truth. Most empaths resist. Not every cry for help deserves your response. Compassion without discernment is self-destruction in disguise. Yes, someone's pain can be valid. Their struggle can be real, and still it may not be yours to carry. Those who truly seek healing will act, grow, and honor the energy you give. Those who seek only your calm will return again and again unchanged, demanding your stillness to quiet their noise. There comes a night when you stare at yet another long message from someone in crisis, and something inside you shifts. You see it clearly. This is not connection. It's dependency. And the most loving thing you can do for both of you is to stop being available for their avoidance. 3. The savior complex that keeps you drained. There's a quiet truth most helpers avoid. Not every act of care comes from love, some come from hunger. The hunger to matter, to feel irreplaceable, to fix what once felt beyond repair. I once knew a therapist who was always surrounded by people in crisis, partners who needed healing. Friends on the edge, clients who blurred the line between work and rescue. She would stay awake until dawn, calming someone's panic, then walk into her own sessions hollowed out. One evening, her supervisor asked her a single question: "What do you get from saving them?" She paused, and in that silence, something cracked open. Beneath all the compassion was a quiet need to be the one who made it right, the one who finally succeeded where no one had before. Helping can feel like purpose. When someone says, "I don't know what I'd do without you," it affirms your worth. It tells you you're special, necessary, good. But that feeling, though comforting, is not pure empathy. It's ego wearing kindness as its mask. This savior complex isn't arrogance, it's identity. You've built your sense of self around being the rescuer. And if you stop saving others, you fear you'll disappear. So you keep the door open, not just for them, but for the version of yourself that feels safe only when needed. Carl Jung once said that we repeat what is unresolved, hoping for a different ending. Perhaps as a child you watched someone you loved unravel and could do nothing to stop it. That helplessness left a mark. Now every broken person feels like another chance, another opportunity to prove that love can heal what once could not. But love doesn't rewrite old stories by exhausting itself. It rewrites them through awareness. The truth is, you cannot fix someone by loving them harder. Healing isn't a transaction of effort, it's a surrender of control. People heal when they are ready, not when you are willing, and sometimes they never will. At the root of this pattern lies a mirror. I save you because I couldn't save me. Every person you rescue stands in for the part of yourself you once abandoned, the child who needed comfort, the adolescent who carried too much. In trying to save others, you've only deepened your distance from the one person who still waits quietly within yourself. The cost of this cycle isn't noble suffering, it's resentment. You give endlessly, but when you finally need care, the silence you receive feels like betrayal. You wonder if your kindness was ever real or just a strategy to be needed. You feel guilty for wanting balance, guilty for resting, guilty for admitting you're tired. But the truth is simple, you're not weak. You're just empty from pouring without refilling. To break the pattern, you must understand empathy doesn't require absorption. You can witness pain without entering it. You can care deeply without losing yourself in another's storm. Boundaries are not barriers to love. They are its structure. The savior mask dissolves the moment you recognize it, not through rejection, but through awareness. And that awareness, calm, clear, and uncompromising, is what truly saves you. Emotional debt. When kindness turns into currency, there's a certain kind of unease that rises when you see an unanswered message from someone who's struggling. It's not worry for their well-being. It's worry about what your silence might say about you. Are they upset? Do they think I don't care? Have I failed them somehow? In that moment, you're not tending to them. You're managing your own worth. Measuring it by responsiveness, by sacrifice, by how quickly you can prove you're still good. That's the moment kindness stops being a gift and becomes a currency. Most empaths live under an invisible contract, one they never consciously agreed to. I will give endlessly, and in return, I will be loved. I will listen without limit, and in return, I will belong. You give not from freedom, but from fear, fear of being unneeded, unloved, unseen. The irony is that no one else knows this contract exists. They see your generosity and assume it's genuine. They don't realize that beneath it lies a quiet calculation: how much you've given, how much you deserve in return. So when they fail to meet an expectation they never knew about, you feel betrayed by an agreement only you were keeping. There are signs you're living in emotional debt. You feel morally guilty for resting. You check your phone, not out of habit, but out of duty, afraid of missing a cry for help. When someone grows distant, you don't think they're busy. You think, I didn't give enough. You overcompensate. You overextend. You explain every no as if it were an apology. And slowly, you become the debtor in every relationship, paying interest on care that was meant to be free. Codependency isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's this subtle exchange: you trade your energy for validation, and they trade their pain for your calm. It feels like love, but it's a quiet economy of need. You stay because you're afraid of being disposable. They stay because you don't demand growth. Two people mirroring each other's avoidance, calling it connection. Seneca once wrote, "No one is free who is enslaved to their body, their possessions, or their reputation." The same is true for those enslaved to their own goodness. When kindness becomes proof of worth, it stops being virtue. It becomes a survival mechanism. True generosity doesn't drain you. It comes from overflow, not emptiness. It doesn't beg to be reciprocated because it was never a bargain to begin with. But when you keep giving past your capacity, your body intervenes. Science calls it chronic stress, but you feel it as quiet numbness. Your nervous system, flooded by others' emotions, begins to treat every message, every sigh, every "can we talk" as a small emergency. Your body moves into protection mode, calm on the outside, hollow within. Kindness, like currency, loses meaning when overissued. When you give too freely, too often, without restoration, its worth diminishes not to others, but to you. You begin to resent what once defined you. You help, but your heart is absent. You listen, but secretly wish for silence. And then you feel shame for even thinking that. Until one night, maybe tonight, you see another message waiting. And this time, you don't answer. Not because you're cold, because you've awakened. You realize the debt was never real. The worth was never conditional. And the love you were trying to earn was always meant to be your own. So you let it sit, unread, unanswered. Not from indifference, from freedom. 5. The night the empath stops answering calls. It doesn't end with an argument. There's no announcement, no final speech, just an ordinary evening, a Tuesday maybe. When the phone lights up with a familiar name, and this time you don't reach for it. You let it ring. And in that small act of stillness, the silence feels louder than any conversation you've ever had. People imagine breaking points as explosions, sudden dramatic moments of collapse. But for empaths, they come quietly. They build through countless small surrenders. Every time you softened your tone, absorbed another person's storm, or made yourself smaller so someone else could feel okay. The breaking point isn't an event. It's the realization that you can't remember what peace feels like when no one needs you. That you've been living half in waiting, always listening for a call, a message, a crisis that will summon you again. And one night, when that inner voice whispers, "What if someone needs me?" another voice finally answers, "So what?" Not with cruelty, with clarity. The first nights of silence feel strange. You catch yourself glancing at your phone, heart tight with guilt. They'll think I don't care. What if something's wrong? What kind of person ignores someone in pain? But beneath the guilt, something new begins to breathe space. A quiet you haven't met in years. You realize you're not rescuing anyone, not managing their emotions, not performing care. You're simply existing in your own life on your own time. What feels like emptiness is not absence. It's your own presence returning. This is the detox of awareness. When you stop regulating others, you must finally meet yourself. The stillness feels awkward, even painful. But it's clean pain, not confusion. It's the sound of your nervous system remembering what calm actually feels like. Soon a shift happens. The phone rings again, and this time you don't flinch. You don't rush to fix or soothe. You pause. Between their need and your instinct, a question arises. Is this mine to carry? Not can I help? Not should I help? Simply, is this mine? Most of the time the answer is no. And that no is not coldness, it's wisdom. You might worry that you're becoming detached, losing your warmth. But what's really happening is refinement. Your kindness is maturing, transforming from a floodlight that blinds into a lantern that guides. You still care deeply. You simply no longer drown to prove it. Picture the lighthouse still unwavering, its light cutting through the fog. It doesn't chase the ships. It stays where it belongs. You used to swim into every storm, believing rescue meant immersion. Now you understand you can be steady light without losing yourself in the sea. Marcus Aurelius called this the rock that remains unmoved, not out of hardness, but out of understanding its nature. This isn't withdrawal, it's alignment. You begin noticing the difference between what drains you and what nourishes you, who seeks your energy and who shares theirs. You stop answering every call, and when you do respond, it's not from duty, but from presence. The conversations grow fewer, but truer. The ones who only needed your calm begin to fade, and those who truly see you remain. The night the empath stops answering calls isn't the end of compassion. It's the beginning of self-respect, the quiet birth of a life led by clarity, not guilt. Peace is the new attraction. Something subtle shifts when you stop being everyone's safe place. You grow quieter, not detached, just steady, less available yet more present when you are. And without effort, the world around you begins to rearrange itself. The ones who fed on your worry start to fade, while those who carry their own calm begin to appear. These are not people who need to be saved. They are people who can meet you where you already stand. Energy is real, not mystical, but measurable in how it feels. When you were absorbing everyone's distress, you radiated a signal: I can hold your pain. Bring it to me. And people did. The more you gave, the more brokenness you attracted. Wounded souls instinctively seek the ones who never say no. But when you begin guarding your peace, when you no longer perform availability, The frequency changes. You stop vibrating in survival. You become grounded, anchored, a quiet presence that no longer invites chaos, but commands respect. And calm, it turns out, is magnetic. Not to those who crave rescue, but to those who've rescued themselves. Co-regulation, that natural exchange, where one nervous system steadies another, still happens, but differently. You no longer align with those who refuse to self-regulate. You resonate with those who are ready to grow. They don't drain you. They match you. They sit in your calm, not to borrow it, but to remember their own. The rest, the ones who call your boundaries distance, will move on. And that is grace, not loss. Something larger is shifting in what we call attraction. Chaos used to feel like chemistry. Drama felt alive. But eventually you learn exhaustion is not love, and peace is not dull. It's rare. The moment you become stable, you stop mistaking volatility for depth. You start noticing the steady ones, the friend who listens quietly, the partner who brings ease instead of tension. Safety becomes the new chemistry. Once you feel it, you can't unfeel it. This is empathy matured, no longer an act of absorption, but of awareness. You don't need to feel someone's pain to understand it. You can hold compassion without carrying their weight. You can witness suffering without drowning in it. True empathy is presence without possession. It honors both souls at once. The Stoics called this temperance, the discipline of enough. It isn't coldness, it's clarity. Giving past your capacity doesn't make you noble, it makes you hollow. Temperance asks quietly, am I giving from fullness or fear, from freedom or obligation? In daily life, this wisdom becomes practical. You pause before replying to the late-night message, 3 breaths, 1 question. Is this mine to hold right now? You begin to say no without apology. You practice silent compassion, caring without interference, witnessing without control. Each small restraint restores something sacred, your inner balance. And then something remarkable happens. The solitude that once felt like exile begins to feel like sanctuary. The silence you used to fill becomes a homecoming. You're not withdrawing from people, you're withdrawing from chaos. In that gentle unavailability, something long lost returns. Peace. And this time you recognize it not as escape, but as your natural state. 7. How to care without losing yourself again. You will return to connection not out of obligation, but out of choice. And this time, something inside you has changed. You've learned the cost of giving without boundaries. You understand the difference between helping and performing. You know now, with quiet certainty, that to care for someone does not mean to carry them. The question that remains is simple but profound. How do you stay open without becoming empty again? After retreating to protect your peace, there's often a lingering fear. What if I can't do relationships anymore? What if I've built too many walls? But what you're feeling isn't closure. It's consciousness. You're coming back to people with awareness, the ability to sense when you're slipping, when empathy begins to turn into self-erasure. A friend once told me I can feel it now, that tightness in my chest when I'm about to fix something that isn't mine. That awareness is your anchor. It's the difference between drowning and choosing how deep you'll go. If you feel deeply emotional, hygiene isn't optional, it's essential. Rest that's real, not scrolling, not numbing, but stillness. Silence without guilt. Journaling even briefly. What did I absorb today that wasn't mine? What do I need to return? Solitude that doesn't ache, time alone, not to recover from people, but to remember yourself. These are not indulgences. They are maintenance, the clearing that allows you to stay open without leaking your peace. And as you grow, you'll learn selective openness. Not everyone deserves full access to you. Some people get your depth. Some get your politeness. Some get nothing, and that's not cruelty. That's discernment. Energy is currency, and wisdom is learning where to spend it. True intimacy isn't about how many people you care for, but how consciously you do it. Before you give, pause and ask, am I doing this from peace or from guilt? Peace feels grounded. You help because you can, and because it costs you nothing sacred. Guilt feels tight, a compulsion to prove goodness through exhaustion. If it's guilt, wait. Give only when you can do so without betraying yourself. Detachment, as the Stoics knew, is not indifference. It's caring without clinging, helping without control. Epictetus said, "We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond." True detachment is loving someone without making their healing a condition for your own peace. It's being present, but not possessed. And so a new form of love emerges: presence without possession. You show up fully, then you release. You care, but you don't carry. You listen, but you don't absorb. You love, but you remain whole. This is the maturity of kindness, calm, firm, enduring. Not because you've stopped feeling, but because you've learned to feel wisely. You can sit beside pain without rushing to fix it. You can say no without guilt. You can walk away without bitterness. It is no longer the kindness that performs. It is the kindness that remains. Outro awareness as sanctuary. Here's the quiet truth revealed: kind people once drew broken souls because their calm made chaos bearable. But that peace was borrowed, temporary, fragile, unsustainable. Now as you protect your energy, something shifts. Your calm begins to attract calm. Your clarity draws clarity. What you guard within becomes what you radiate outward. A micro-ritual. The next time someone brings you their pain, don't rush to answer. Pause. Take one full breath. Then ask yourself softly, is this mine to carry? Not can I help, not should I, simply, is this mine? Most of the time it isn't, and recognizing that isn't coldness, it's grace. You're not cold, you're conscious. If lately you've worried that you've become distant too, boundaried too still, understand this: you are not closing, you are awakening. You can now see the line between compassion and codependency, between love and self-abandonment. That clarity can feel like loneliness at first, but it isn't exile. It's return to yourself, to peace, to the steady ground you once forgot was yours. Save this if you find yourself awake at 2 a.m., weary from holding everyone else's storms. Come back here. Read these words again. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to choose. You are allowed to care without carrying. The truth you've been searching for awareness was never meant to separate you from the world. It was meant to bring you home to the quiet space within where peace is no longer borrowed, but finally your own.